Thank you very much, John, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for coming. I'm delighted to say there's people standing at the back, so as my primary school teacher used to say, there's plenty of room at the front if you'd like to get a good view. This is a presentation about HS2 and the HS2 stations and the impact that the HS2 stations are going to have on the places that they serve. And it's a presentation in two halves. The first half I won't have slides, I'll just talk. And then in the second half I'll bring some slides in to illustrate some of the solutions that I'm identifying. I realise I might be a bit tall for the screen, but I'm sure you can all work around my head. I want to start with a challenge, really. I don't know how many of you in the audience work closely on HS2, but the challenge really is to everyone about the dangers in HS2 of oversimplifying what we're talking about. It is a frustration, I think, to all of us working on the project that we're talking about an investment beyond anything the country's ever made before, the single biggest mega project that the UK has ever delivered, something that's going to transform the economy. And yet we end up, always talking in the press about cost. And if we're not talking about cost, we're talking about politics. And if we're not talking about politics, we're talking about London. We really need to remember HS2 is a national project which will bring benefits across the whole line of route. And many of these benefits are yet to be established. And hopefully in today's presentation, I'll bring some of those out. And I want to distinguish between what we think of as the marquee developments around HS2 and the non-marquee developments. So Arcadis is really proud to be working in perhaps the single biggest station when HS2 opens, which will be the new Curzon Street station in Birmingham. There's also big marquee developments in Euston, here at Birmingham Interchange and in Old Oak Common. But in talking about those, we tend to overlook the benefits that are going to happen elsewhere in the country. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So the first point to make is just how many non-marquee stations, it's a clumsy phrase, but we'll get there in the end, how many non-marquee stations there are. And I'll just illustrate some of them. If you think about the line of route for HS2, going up to Manchester from London, there are places along that line of route which will benefit from it, places we don't always think about. So they include places in Staffordshire, in Cheshire, places like Stafford, Stoke and Crewe, and Manchester Airport, as Paul's just mentioned. Places in the northwest like Warrington, and Runcorn and Preston and Liverpool, all the way up the West Coast Main Line, up through the Lake District, up to Scotland, Glasgow and Edinburgh, and places in the rest of Scotland before you get to Glasgow and Edinburgh. They include the East Midlands. There'll be a brand new station at East Midlands Parkway, right next to East Midlands Airport, in the middle of the Freeport there, and then through there up to Derby and Nottingham and up to Yorkshire, Sheffield, and eventually Leeds, and maybe even beyond Leeds. We don't talk enough about that, and I think just by listing that list I have done, we're talking around 20, maybe more places which will benefit directly from HS2 when it happens. So how will they benefit? Well, they will get direct train services because HS2 trains won't just run on the brand new tracks that are being built. They'll be compatible with the rest of the rail network, so they'll go off of the track and serve these other places. And there will be other stations, of course, next to the list of places I've described, which will just be one stop away. So here we are, very close to Coventry. Coventry will be within minutes by train of two new HS2 stations. Coventry will benefit very significantly from HS2. And there are places all around the country, as I say, that will benefit that way. The benefits will be varied, and again, I think we're not talking enough about this. There's benefits in journey time, because HS2 will be very fast and will allow journeys to be a lot quicker. But there'll be congestion benefits in the station, because HS2 will take intercity traffic away from existing stations and allow them to replace it with other local routes. It'll bring capacity to the stations, it'll decongest the stations, open up new platforms which might not be used at the moment because there isn't demand. And obviously it will transform the places that are served, because once you have a railway station like I've described, the place itself is a totally different proposition. And we're all familiar with examples of places maybe in London, maybe elsewhere, where a new station has really transformed a place. Finally, one of the huge benefits is a political benefit for the places concerned. So it will allow all these places to meet the aspirations that they have for their growth and their development. And we've heard a little bit about what that means at Manchester Airport, and that will be true all the way along the line of route. So I hope that illustrates, some of these really, really exciting, significant benefits in places that we just aren't clocking early enough as part of the HS2 story. That's one of the challenges. I think one of the other challenges is just how hard this is. I mean, it's reasonably easy to say, although it's taken us a few years to get there. It's even harder to do, and it's even harder to plan for. So what are the challenges? Well, HS2 is not planning on building new stations at these places. You know, we're not going to see a wholesale renewal of stations up and down the line of route. They'll do what they need to do. They'll extend the platform maybe, or they'll make some upgrades to the railway track or the signalling or whatever, but it won't normally be a major investment in the station. That's a challenge. This also isn't at the top of HS2's list of priorities at the moment. You know, they're very much focused on dealing with the things we read about in the paper, building the new line, making sure that it opens to a reasonably quick timescale. And obviously HS2 Limited is under a huge amount of pressure. Some of these places can maybe feel a little bit left out of the discussion and not being engaged as much as they can be by the new railway. Obviously, there will also be limited budget, which is a reality of this sort of very large-scale development. There isn't always going to be the money to deliver what needs to be done, and there'll be other constraints as well, whether that's in the planning system, the land use system, or others. I think the final constraint, which we find really interesting in Arcadis when we talk to partners along the line of route, is the gap between local political aspiration and what the market will want to bring. I think everyone can envisage what a fantastic station would look like, and we all know that HS2 will increase land values, maybe by up to 20% in many places. But often that increase in land values won't be enough to fund the aspiration that local political leaders have. So you have this gap between what people want to achieve and what the Treasury can afford to pay for, or what the private sector wants to invest in. And I think that's another very interesting aspect of railway development that we don't explore often enough. The last point, sorry, there is another last point, is governance, because this is really difficult. You know, delivering this kind of transformation is hard in any place. And when we look at a place like Birmingham Interchange, where we are now, or Curzon Street, or Euston, Old Oak Common, you know, in all of these places you have very significant political leadership, normally through a mayor or a growth company, as our colleague will come on to explain next. But you have a very strong focal point for delivery and driving the benefits they want to see. That's not always going to be possible, and when we're talking about many, many places, as I have done in the presentation, it's not going to be possible to do them all concurrently. So I hope that's interesting to you in terms of setting out what the challenge is. And now I'm going to come on and just illustrate a little bit through Arcadis' experience in this country and around the world, how we've overcome some of these challenges and just what some case studies might be. That's not my slide. There we are. So we start with a vision as a business for how stations can really make a difference on the ground, and that's true through many of the developments that we've done. What they look like in practice is a bit different, and the best thing about this presentation is it allows me to showcase my slightly dodgy Dutch accent, so you'll forgive me with some of these Dutch examples. I've got half a dozen examples just to share, to bring to life what solutions look like to some of the challenges that I've identified. The first station we have here is a place called the Bilmar Arena, which is in Amsterdam. It's in Greater Amsterdam. And the point about this is that it's a station that's been there for many years, but as Dutch train services have evolved, it's gone from being a very minor local station to somewhere which is really right at the heart of the integrated Dutch rail network. So you have trains between the city centre and the airport, you have trains between Amsterdam and the rest of the Netherlands, you have international services, really in a place that was traditionally quite sleepy, I guess. What we've been able to do with the client, as you get a sense from that picture, is really help densify the station, help without massively increasing the footprint of the station or the kind of need for new external station buildings, really help the station develop to make sure that all of these new services can stop there. Passengers can make quick, efficient, safe, comfortable changes between their trains and go about their journey as the rail service has evolved. I mean, that might be the sort of option that we see in some of the places in the UK, maybe a place like Crewe, which is already very, very heavily served by different train services, which will have a significant uptick in high-speed trains there as well. You can imagine the evolution of that station. The second example is a British example. This is Manchester Victoria Station, one of the other stations in Manchester. A few years ago, Arcadis led the design of this station to help restore and renovate the building, but the goal that we particularly focused on is a good example of a wider political goal in Manchester, and that was bringing tram services and train services together under one single roof so that you could get off of the tram and onto the train, or vice versa, without getting wet or without losing your way, or, in a really seamless, easy way. I think, again, another example of how places evolve, stations evolve, as new stations are added, new services are added, and they can develop to meet a political vision. The third one, we're back in Holland again, and this is a place called Driebergen, which is near Utrecht. Driebergen is a small town which, again, as Dutch rail services evolved, has a bit like the other one, suddenly become a place where lots of services call, and the stations had to grow in order to keep up. What we're particularly proud of here is how the development of the station has supported development of the town. So this isn't really a railway story. This is an example of a reasonably low-key but very, very effective development of the town around the railway station, or specifically under the railway station. So, we've allowed, with the town council, the placemaking to evolve in a way that's hugely sustainable, drives pedestrian and cycling journeys rather than the car, and means that the station, a growing station, hasn't been a barrier in the middle of a growing town. It's been a place that's facilitated growth across the town. And again, I think you can imagine how that would evolve in a place, say, like Warrington in the UK, where Warrington Bank Quay is going to have a really, really significant high-speed service when the line goes up there, and a huge development opportunity in and around that station in that town. Next example looks good, and this is in a place called Zoetermeer in the Netherlands. But it illustrates a very different point. It has won architectural awards, but the point of this station is that it's a modular station which was only built to reflect the amount of money that was available. So it was not the station that the town council wanted. They aspired to something bigger, but in discussion with the transport authorities, they were basically told, well, you can only have a smaller station. So when money is available, when traffic has developed, when the railway service has taken off even further, then it will be extremely easy using the modular design process to extend it. Well, you basically unscrew the attractive award-winning bit, put a new platform on, and then screw it back on again, I guess. That's a technical term, but it's the principle, is of cutting your cloth according to what's available, not planning too far ahead of what the political will be, and certainly, building confidence with the railway operator by not just expecting money to flow automatically, but going for what can be afforded and making a great success of it. And everything that we understand is that this is a great success. And the final example, it's back to the UK, to London Bridge, and we're hugely proud of our work in Arcadis leading the design on London Bridge, which, so I have to put it in the slide pack, but it genuinely is, a really transformational development in a major London station. But really what it shows is what you can do with an ambitious client when you're trying to transform a station. So London Bridge is now a highly effective interchange, where not so much between the tube and the train, but between different train services. So, at high volume, with trains coming into all the different platforms every 3 to 4 minutes, London Bridge carries many, many, many more people than it previously did because of this ambitious investment in pedestrian access within the station. And, thinking again of HS2 examples, we would hope that this would be the sort of approach that might be taken, say, at Manchester Piccadilly or other new HS2 stations, because we're not just building HS2 to go from A to B. Hope I've got that across. HS2 will be the backbone of a new UK transport system with lots and lots of other connectivity coming off of it, and therefore lots of scope for transforming the way that stations are used. In conclusion, I think it's time for us to embrace the complexity of HS2, to start to be more excited about the benefits of the scheme, not just to see it as a cost-led problem or a political-led problem or something that makes us, somehow less confident in our ability as a country to build aspirational infrastructure. I think it's something that will really be transformational everywhere it goes, and I hope I've given you an impression of the range of places that will be served, and also the real scope for creativity and really transformational partnership working between railway professionals and the local leaders in the places that it'll serve. And I look forward to following up with many of you at a later date. So thank you very much.